Yeah.
I remember laughing once because I just read this paragraph where I think, and I don't remember it perfectly, but Heathcliff said to Cathy after he'd gone away for 3 years and he'd come back and she'd married someone else, which is, you'd think, a really tragic and beautiful moment. But he comes back and he says, "Oh yeah, I was going to go over to your old house and kill your brother and then kill myself. But then I saw you and I thought I'll just come have a chat first." And she's like, "Oh, nice." And it's like, what is wrong with you people?
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Misshelved, your bi-weekly dose of bookstore love. I'm your host, Nicole Brinkley, and if you're somehow new to the podcast, here's the gimmick. Every 2 weeks, I introduce you to an independent bookseller in conversation with an author they love. We are in the last few episodes of what will currently be our final season. Maybe I'll resurrect it one day, but for now, our final season. And our independent bookseller for today is none other than the technical editor for Misshelved, Rebecca Speas.
Hello, I am Rebecca Speas, and I am the technical editor of Misshelved, the podcast, and I'm a bookseller at One More Page Books in Arlington, Virginia.
Rebecca is in conversation with the wonderful and newly award-winning Tasha Suri.
Hi, I'm Tasha Suri, and I'm the author of What Souls Are Made Of, and today Rebecca is going to interview me, which is very exciting.
Settle in as these two talk about what brings them joy, and also Wuthering Heights and their love of angry female characters.
Awesome. Well, hello, Tasha. Thank you so much, first of all, for sitting down to chat with me. I'm so thrilled.
I am so excited to be chatting as well. This is absolutely lovely.
And second of all, I think congratulations are in order because as we are recording this, literally last night, your book, The Jasmine Throne, won the World Fantasy Award for Best Novel,
Yes.
which is absolutely amazing and radical. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I'm grinning really hard. You can't see it, but you can trust that I am. It was really a surprise. I know I was nominated, but it's you don't think you're going to win because it would be silly to think you're going to win when you look at your competition. But I was really grateful to win, and I was on Zoom when it was announced, and I screamed so loudly that one of my cats, God bless him, panicked and fell off the sofa.
Oh, no.
So I appeared on screen and I was just laughing and I was apologizing to my cat, which I feel like is the best way to start an acceptance speech for a big award.
I think so. I mean, the Zoom era is sort of like, let me see all of your animals while you are, giving speeches and taking classes and whatnot. So that's, I think, perfect.
It really is.
Oh my goodness. That's so exciting. I'm so happy. I just actually finished The Jasmine Throne a few weeks ago because I came to your books, I think, in a little bit of reverse order from how other people have. I was aware of all of your books and I had actually picked up copies and I'd heard really wonderful things about them and I kept meaning to get to them. But it was actually when What Souls Are Made Of, your Wuthering Heights remix, was announced that I said, okay, no, I absolutely have to read Tasha's books now. So I devoured What Souls Are Made Of and then went back to all of your other books and inhaled those as well. So I thought we would start with What Souls Are Made Of. And I wanted to ask you what brought you to Wuthering Heights specifically as something you wanted to tackle.
Oh, yeah, of course. I'm actually really glad you started with What Souls Are Made Of because I have such a soft spot for that book. It's really the book of my heart. All my books are the books of my heart, but that one in particular. So What Souls Are Made Of is part of the Remix Classic series by Fievel and Friends. And every book in that series is a fresh and diverse remix rather than a retelling of a classic. And I was approached by Emily Settle, who is the editor of that series. And she said, "Do you want to write a classic?" And I said, yes, but I said, I want to write Wuthering Heights because absolutely one of my favorite books. I read it as a teenager and I remember loving it. And I was a slightly odd teenager, I think, like many of us were. I really loved reading. This sounds normal, I realize, but bear with me. And I loved Wuthering Heights. And I used to get in arguments with people over it. Nobody else wanted to. I made them. Because I read that book and I thought, oh, Heathcliff's not white. And then everyone I spoke to thought he was, and every film/TV adaptation made him white, which made absolutely no sense to me because explicitly in the text, he's not. And I started basically coming up with my own very clear and thought through understanding of what this book was about and what it said about the era in which it was written. And getting to write What Souls Are Made Of allowed me to basically go on a rant for an entire book about what I think of Wuthering Heights, which was great fun.
Oh my goodness. I love it. I also was perhaps a very odd teenager in that I loved Wuthering Heights. I read it as a teenager, and then I think I read it again for school. And I find I am in the minority, I think, in that I like Wuthering Heights a lot more than any other Bronte, including Jane Eyre. And I love it so much, but it's a hard book. Like, it's a really complicated book. And, you know, just with like how it's constructed and the type of people that it deals with. And it wasn't until I read What Souls Are Made Of, I think, that I really firmly drew those lines that Wuthering Heights is not in a little bubble in Yorkshire. It is, in fact, touching all of the rest of the empire, all the rest of the UK. And I love that you got to go on a rant for
Oh no, you're going to
300
set me off
pages.
again. One of the things that I think is super fascinating about any, let's say any historical British novel set in a country house or a house, I guess, the Gothic house, let's call it that, is that it's about a really small, localized, often claustrophobic setting. But that setting is driven by a darkness and an anxiety that's often transformed into literal ghosts that's driven by empire. So even you see it in Jane Eyre too. So Jane Eyre is, of course, the story of a girl who becomes a governess and falls in love with her boss. So she finds out her boss is still married and his wife is in the attic, which is a good place to keep a wife, I assume.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a big house, why not? But in the text, it talks about the idea that the wife is, her madness is associated with foreignness to some extent. And there are moments when various characters, so Adele, who's a child who's French, is meant to be spoiled because she is French, is the kind of implication. And Jane eventually gets to have money of her own because of imperial interests. So a lot of these stories that feel extremely British, of course, are drawing on Britain's imperial connections. And they have to, because that's where Britain's wealth came from. So yes, Wuthering Heights is on its surface the story of two kids and then adults who are in an extremely dysfunctional house where no one is sensible and everyone is cruel. And their love for each other and the choices that they make destroy them. But that story also has threads that draw on empire. I think it does it less explicitly than Jane Eyre, but it definitely does it.
Yeah, and I think with Wuthering Heights and what you did and What Souls Are Made Of, this isn't really spoilers for What Souls Are Made Of. It's the remix part of it that you very explicitly made Heathcliff not white, and thus tying Cathy's father, the man who sort of finds him in Liverpool in the book and just says, hey, I picked up a child, he lives here now, and actually giving it that depth and those threads to those imperial interests. And the fallout of that I've found extremely affecting and really wonderful to read about. And I love the physical manifestations of the ghosts, because I'm rambling now, but
No, you're fine.
The ghosts and What Souls Are Made Of are such a clear imperial legacy that these now teenagers in your book have to grapple with, and the grace that you gave them to grapple with their own ghosts and ghosts that they didn't have a choice in, I absolutely adored.
Oh, thank you so much. Ghosts, I think, are such a... I hate horror movies, to be clear. I can't cope with ghosts in any kind of media, but I find them fascinating.
Yeah.
I always... Because they always represent something repressed, something suppressed that needs to come out, right?
Mm.
And what was interesting about writing What Souls Are Made Of is that ghosts are such a significant part of a lot of South Asian lore.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's a spoiler to say that Bengal is a really big part of the story, that Kathy's father in this story had been in Bengal, what
Mm.
is now an area that's part of India and also Bangladesh, because, borders have changed over time. And if you talk to anybody from that area, ghosts are such a significant part of the, I guess, folklore is a way of putting it, but I don't think that feels quite true. Part of the
Mm.
cultural fabric. That also sounds terrible, but I think you get what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And I wanted to draw on those ghosts in the story in small ways and also tie them in with, I guess, the typical gothic ghosts that haunt houses in British fiction. So that was really fun to kind of bring together. And I didn't want those ghosts to feel totally malevolent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're right that I have lots of moments where Kathy and Heathcliff have to grapple with ghosts. And what I think is quite interesting and what I felt quite emotional about, I guess, is that you don't get to choose your ghosts. They are there because of the choices made by people who come before you, and especially for teenagers like these characters are in my version. You're stuck grappling with traumas and history and choices that you didn't choose, but you still have the choice to handle in the
Mm.
way that you see fit, in a way that will either save you or condemn you, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's such a wonderful way of putting it. And, in Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, the ghosts are never explained really at all. It's you get Kathy at the very beginning, like crashing through the window and scaring this very poncy guest at Wuthering Heights, and they're sort of never mentioned again. But the fact that they are haunting this place is always taken for granted. And I loved that in this we got, you know, putting it more into the cultural fabric, I guess, and sort of having them not just be a scary ghost, but also, something that these characters can make peace with.
Oh, definitely. What I actually do love about Emily Bronte is she so doesn't care if you
Mhm.
like her characters or you like her plot. She just does what she wants. And that isn't to say that it's not like beautifully crafted. The
Mhm.
whole way, I will argue till the cows come home, that book is really beautifully put together and it plays with unreliable narrators and it does some really cool stuff. But
Mhm.
she doesn't care if you like it. Whereas I unfortunately do care if you like it. And I had obviously going into this book have a very specific political understanding of what occurred and
Mm.
a specific journey I want those characters to be on. So I do care how they feel about the ghosts, how they react to them, what choices they make. Whereas I think for Emily, she was like, yeah, Kathy's going to be a ghost at the beginning. She's going to come through a window. And what? What are you going to do about it? Which I respect.
I also love that about both Emily Bronte and Wuthering Heights, and I think it's in oh my gosh, it's been a while since I've read it, but I think Charlotte Bronte, like, wrote an introduction for the 2nd or 3rd edition or something, and even Charlotte is like, "Look, I don't know where Emily got these ideas, but stop maligning my sister. Like, look, it's weird, okay? But, she did it."
There's a palpable air of embarrassment in her introduction, which I
Yeah,
really like.
it's like it's so funny. It's the older sister being like, "Look, I'm sorry for my goth sister, but listen, it's really a good book, I promise, if you read it." And Emily was just like, "Whatever. Pew, pew, pew." Um, which, yeah, I think is why I love Wuthering Heights so much. It's that it's so messy and the characters don't care. I mean, they do care, but they are not apologetic about the fact that they are really messy, angry people.
They don't even seem to recognize how messy and angry they
Oh, yeah.
are. I
Yeah.
I remember laughing once because I just read this paragraph where I think, and I don't remember it perfectly, but Heathcliff said to Kathy after he'd gone away for 3 years and he'd come back and she'd married someone else, which is, you'd think, a really tragic and beautiful moment. But he comes back and he says, oh yeah, I was going to go over to your old house and kill your brother and then kill myself. But then I saw you and I thought, I'll just come have a chat first. And she's like, oh, nice. And it's like, what is wrong with you people?
It's like, can we pause just for a minute and let's unpack that?
There's so much to unpack there. Yeah, there's much.
Also the bit where Hindley is like dangling the baby over the balcony and drops him and Heathcliff catches him, and then like later is like, why did I catch him? It would have been perfect to just let the baby fall. And it's like, Heathcliff, my man.
Don't kill the baby.
Don't kill the baby, please. Yeah, and jumping off that, I guess.
From baby killing to...
Yeah, exactly. From baby killing to the Wuthering Heights story. No. That in Wuthering Heights and in What Souls Are Made Of, and also I think into your fantasy books, characters being really complicated and, morally gray and angry, and having that anger and that rage be something to catalyze, to motivate them or to really sustain them through all of these trials and tribulations that they're going through, I think is really fascinating. And I was wondering if you might talk a little bit about that anger and that rage in characters.
Oh yeah, sure. So I don't think it will surprise you if I say that I have quite a bad temper. I think I repress it very well, but I always used to feel rage, and still do very strongly, over anything, I guess, depending on the time of the month. But yeah, injustice or unfairness or somebody doing something I don't like, I guess. And I also knew that socially that rage wasn't acceptable. So I used to grapple, especially when I was younger, with the idea that I knew that, for example, a lot of the men around me and the boys were allowed to be angry and the women were not. And that there was an acceptable way to deal with female anger, and that was to repress it until you have heart disease. But that was the only way to do it. Apart from that, there was no real outlet.
Yeah.
And so I always thought of rage as something very destructive that was self-destroyed if it didn't destroy something outwardly. And those were the two options. But oddly enough, years ago, I read an interview, I think it was with Neil Gaiman, about Terry Pratchett. And it talked about the fact that he was always angry. So Terry Pratchett was always, always angry. And I thought, that man writes the most funny and compassionate books I've ever read. They're very incisive about politics, but they are highly compassionate and human stories. How can somebody so angry be so compassionate? And it kind of, and that wasn't the only moment that made it twig for me, but I think it was one of them where I realized that anger can be constructive. It can change things. It can make you better. It's kind of what makes you alive. So I like to explore how people engage with anger, because I think that anger can be destructive, but it can also be really creative. And I think it's a very natural and reasonable reaction to an unjust world or an unjust family, whatever it may be. And I like to see how people use that.
Yeah, that sort of hit the nail on the head for me as well, because I too have a temper that it takes a while for me to get there, but when I'm there, I am also quite furious sometimes. And similarly, I think there was this expectation sort of throughout my life and with family and authority figures, like that rage is unacceptable for me to have in the way that I was having it. And it was something to either be repressed or to teach myself out of.
Yes, yeah.
And I always push back against it. And I am discovering now, as I am reading more and more books, that those kinds of characters that are furious and angry and like sometimes it gets the better of them and sometimes it manifests in these really destructive ways, that it can be, like you said, that catalyst for change that can be put to good use. It was something that, because I read all of your books really, really close together, it was something that kind of popped out off the page to me, because I was like, I would die for Kathy. I would die for Priya. I would die for Malini. I would die for all of these very angry, beautiful, complex women and girls. And I just
thank
love
you.
that is in your writing arsenal, and that you are showing people that it is okay to be angry, and I quite
Yes.
appreciate it.
Thinking about it, I think that's something you see in Wuthering Heights as well. Kathy isn't described as angry in Wuthering Heights, but her anger destroys her. She
Mm,
she willfully destroys herself with her anger.
mm,
I remember being really struck when I read it in a really powerful way that she looked at these men largely around her, her husband and Heathcliff, who she still loved, who wanted things from her that she couldn't give. And she went, I have no power in this situation but to destroy myself because that will hurt you. And that's what she
mm,
does. And I really wanted to explore that in my own way in What Souls Are Made Of, because I wrote What Souls Are Made Of in a kind of turning moment for those characters. So Heathcliff has run away.
mm,
In the original book, he goes away for 3 years and comes back. So he's just run away in my version. Kathy is trying to turn herself into someone that she thinks she has to be, that woman who doesn't have rage.
mm,
And she has to acknowledge that if she does that, one day the angry Kathy will come back.
hmm.
And she's almost her own ghost. Or I think I actually say that she's her own ghost, that her rage and her anger can't just go away. They're going to keep existing. They're going to rear up at some point and they are going to destroy her.
Mm. Yeah, and so moving, I guess, into the Burning Kingdoms trilogy, which I have not read the Oleander Sword yet, but I have it, and I am excited about it. But anger is obviously, on quite a national scale. There, the princess has been betrayed. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
personal anger, a lot of feelings for revenge. And on a broader sort of genre level, I think that similarly, for a very long time, female characters, queer characters, characters of color have not been able to be angry without being, quote, unlikable or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And I just wanted to also celebrate those characters as being in this wave of amazing fantasy and science fiction that we are getting that can buck that tradition a little bit as well.
Yes, it's so nice to be part of that wave. I know that the Jasmine Throne often gets put together in the Sapphic trifecta with The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke and She Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. And although I know that She Became the Sun is a lot about like a non-binary character, I think the expressions of rage outside of cis white maleness
Yes.
is very empowering. Although I think I write quite likable characters by and large, I really dislike the need or the expectation that marginalized characters should be, I guess, emissaries for their people, that they
Right.
must be nice and likable.
Mm.
And I remember sort of hating the concept that if I were going to write sapphic South Asian coded women, they would have to be nice and likable. I thought that isn't what I want. That isn't what I want to read. That isn't who I am.
Mhm.
So it feels very empowering to give your characters as much space to be messy on the page as less marginalized characters have always had. That's
Mm.
really nice. And sometimes you don't necessarily want to hold up a beautiful shining mirror. Sometimes you want to show what's ugly, right? Because that
Mm.
is also very empowering. So that has been very fun, I think.
Is it more fun to write the messy, dramatic, like heart-rending, fire-burning scenes than maybe those moments of happiness and joy?
I love writing dramatic stuff. I am a dramatic bitch, unfortunately.
I'm a messy bitch who loves drama.
I am. I am. I really am.
Tasha, are you a Scorpio?
I'm not. I'm a
Okay.
Sagittarius.
I am a Scorpio, so
See, this is the thing. I really want to believe in astrology, but I am such a terrible example of a Sagittarius that I ruin it for myself at every single turn. I read my horoscope and it's like, oh, you're outgoing and extroverted. Absolutely not. I'm not either of those things. What was I going to say?
Oh, I'm so sorry. You love the drama. The drama.
I do.
Good.
I do. I used to read a lot of historical texts about the Mughals because my first duology, the Books of Amber, is based on the Mughal era in India. And I remember getting really irate because I read this biography about Shah Jahan, one of the various emperors, and it was so critical of Nur Jahan, who was this particular very important figure. She was married to an emperor. He was not very good at emperoring, so she ruled. And she did that in very difficult circumstances in the sense that she was veiled and sequestered, so she couldn't rule outwardly. She had to use male family members in order to enact many of her policies. And the way that the writer of this book interpreted that was to say that she was just lifting her family up and giving her cousins and her brothers and her father power, and she was conniving and she was manipulative. And I thought, hang on a minute. Would you say this about a man? You wouldn't.
Yeah,
you wouldn't.
Absolutely.
And it's this thing about glorifying power if it comes in a very specific, familiar and safe paradigm, and not glorifying power if it comes in any other way. Like, I'm all about a critique of power, don't get me wrong, but I still want women to get to have some of it before I critique it.
Right. Yeah. And also, I think by virtue of that, if the women that you are writing have the power and then you start critiquing the power, that doesn't negate the fact that they got the power. Like,
right,
I don't know.
Right.
It's the historian in me that I'm just like, yes, we can hold multitudes at the same time.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's really interesting that when you look at something like fictional or historical empire, right? So if you look at the British Empire or you look at fantasy empire in fantasy worlds,
yeah,
they often, what is difficult about those empires is they do a lot of good for specific people and do a lot of evil for others. But often the people they do good for would suffer if that was gone. And that doesn't necessarily mean the very, very wealthy who are going to benefit no matter what. It means very normal people. So what I found really fascinating about researching the 1780s when I based What Souls Are Made Of is that Liverpool was not a great place to live if you were poor, I'll be honest. But it had more industry and it had more resources than it had ever had before because of empire. But those resources, that wealth, that possibility that was growing, relied entirely upon, well, among other things, the triangular slave trade, and also on the exploitation of various, what would eventually become the British Empire, colonies of the British Empire. And that sucks. I don't really have an answer. I just think it was really interesting to kind of see the different sides, even if I have a very clear sense of what side I'm on.
Yeah, and another theme that I have, obviously picked up on in all of your books is that idea of empire and grappling with empire. And what you were saying about how, be it the historical British Empire or this, a fantasy empire, that division of these are the people that benefit from these imperial structures, these are the people that are actively harmed by it. And, we can't change the past. We can't go back in time unless, that's the type of book you're in. And, rewrite the history of that empire. But we do have the agency to suss out where we are now and figure out how to move forward. And I think that your books do a really excellent and skillful job of dancing between those. And
thank you.
have you read Babel by R.F. Kuang?
I had to stop reading it because I was on deadline, but I am reading it. And I
Okay.
also know, because it's a Rebecca Kuang book, it's going to eviscerate me and take out my organs. I'm aware of that. But go on.
I literally just finished it the other day and can confirm evisceration occurred.
Excellent.
Organs were destroyed, heart broken, and I won't spoil anything, but we're talking about this wave of really excellent science fiction and fantasy that specifically deals with the legacy of empire, the fallout of empire, and it does a really good job of doing that same thing of looking at just who benefits and what it means to take advantage of that benefit. And, it doesn't cast one particular group in wholly good light, wholly bad light, but it really revels in that uncertainty.
I think there's a real desire in some people, not all, for stories of colonization and empire to be stories of these are the good people, these are the bad people.
Mm.
And I think that there is, there's a clear, this is probably good and this is bad. But the reality of taking big theoretical political concepts and putting them on real people, even if those real people are fictional, is that it's messy. It's always messy, because if you build something, even if it's evil, to tear it down is going to have consequences. Does that mean you shouldn't? It probably means you still should, but you have to work out what those consequences are going to be. What I loved in the beginning of Babel, I like that you have, from what I read, characters that are so embedded in a certain type of Britishness, but who are also always going to be, at some extent, alienated from it because they're being used by it, even as they're being brought into it, which is also a very insidious imperial approach to power, which I think she's a great writer. She knows what she's doing. Yeah.
She's aware. So another part of my life is that I am a public historian. I work at a historic house in Washington, D.C. And
that's so cool.
And it is something that I think maybe because now it is also part of my other day job, is dealing with specifically American legacies of empire, because I think as Americans, we don't think of ourselves as an empire. We always cast ourselves as, the Revolutionary War. We fought off the British Empire and we became our own country. But as American history has progressed, that is obviously not true all the time. And specifically with the historic house that I work at, we're dealing with the American Civil War. And so there's a lot wrapped up in race and class and the legacy of enslavement in the United States, and helping people walk through their own ideas about real life history, I think has really made me appreciate it when it's happening fictionally as well. And also plus some women who love women with sharp knives and big arm muscles, and you've got yourself a winner in my book.
I remember seeing on TikTok somebody talking about why in Britain we never talk about the Revolutionary War, whereas it's such a significant part of American history, because we don't. It's just occasionally you'll see someone joke about it, like, oh, well, we're not yours anymore. And I'm like, it's never even occurred to me to think about it. And the person on TikTok pointed out that Britain took over so many places that it's just not significant. I was like, yeah, not something to boast about, really, is it? that you colonized so many countries. But it is interesting that our self-perception, and I'm using R as a kind of a cultural, countrywide, nationwide perception, can be very at odds with how we are seen from the outside. And even our own collective consciousness can be very fractured. So I guess the way that works in fiction is that you can have people who think empire is wonderful and people who think empire is terrible and people who have very different views of what should be done about empire. So in the Burning Kingdoms, I have characters who think, the only way is blood and war, and other characters who think that the way is peace and negotiation, and other characters who are just going along having crushes on people and not really thinking things through. And I've seen readers, and I try not to read reviews, but I've seen readers think that I have an opinion on which one's the best. I don't. I don't think there are any easy answers, unfortunately. But I like exploring it. I like kind of diving into fiction to kind of explore questions of how we define ourselves and our history and our identity, and how other people do so.
That's awesome. We've been talking a long time about very heavy topics, I think. So now I do have some fun questions to ask you as well. We can only talk about empire for so long. But, as an antidote, say, or at least a counterbalance to the rage that I think many people feel, what are some things that you gravitate to counteract that rage? Something that you really love or helps you find peace or enjoyment?
Well, it's a bit of a busman's holiday, as they call it, but I love reading other people's stories and watching films and watching TV shows. But I'm going to talk about D&D, because D&D brings me so much joy. Like, it makes me so happy.
Amazing. Go on.
So I never watched things like Critical Role, I know. But years ago, Well, actually, at the beginning of the pandemic, a bunch of friends got together online and started a D&D campaign. And the person DMing it, he said, I think I've got too many people. So I said, it's okay, I'll stay out of it. My wife was part of it. I also just didn't want to do the math involved in D&D. I really hate math. But then
Mood.
as a joke, I joined in for a birthday campaign. And I made the most ridiculous character, a character I never would have normally made. I called him Dolph Longman. He rollerbladed and he wore shorts. He's a bard and he had a keytar.
Exquisite.
He was perfect in every way. And after we played this one joke campaign, they said, do you want to join our normal campaign? And I was like, with Dolph? And they said, yes, with Dolph. So for 2 years, I played a shirtless bard man called Dolph. And it was the most fun I've had. But we recently ended that campaign and we started a new one. And I said, "Oh, brilliant! I can now play a serious character. I could play a woman. So I'm playing a divorced dad cleric. So it's so much fun. It's so much fun.
Oh my gosh, I love Dolph. I would die for Dolph. Also,
Thank you. He's very lovable.
oh my gosh. So I am like in a couple of weeks I am going to do my second ever D&D campaign.
What class are you playing? What character do you know?
So I don't know yet, but the first time I played, I was a barbarian because I wanted to hit things with a big axe. And
That's fair.
also didn't want to do like spell math. So I had a barbarian who was basically Chris Hemsworth from the Ghostbusters movie.
Oh my god, yes. So we both played himbos?
We did!
We have the best taste.
His name was Beef Honeydew.
No, it was.
It was spelled BIEF, Honeydew.
I love this so much. I'm crying.
and I honestly I want to bring Beef back again on some other campaign because
you have to bring Beef back.
Yeah. I just very much love him. But this time I was like, no, as much as I love Beef, like I'll do something different. So I'm thinking a warlock because he seems like a weird fun time to have. But I'm going on like pure vibes only.
That's the only way to play D&D, pure vibes.
Yeah.
That's the only way to do it.
So I'm very excited to delve into D&D like properly. But I think we have time for one more question real quick. I love this question. I ask it of every author that I interview. I call it my syllabus of you. If you had to teach a class about like this is who Tasha Suri is as a person, as an artist, what piece of media, book, movie, album, anything like that would you assign for people to study? It could be a couple as well.
It might have to be a couple. I think you would have to, this says so much about me, I think. You would have to watch Sailor Moon, and you would have to also read Kushiel's Dart. This is a very strange combination of things.
I love it. I'm obsessed.
But you would also have to watch, I think it was season 5 to 7 of Drag Race. Not before, not after. And maybe that's enough. I think the 3 things are enough.
That's exquisite. I'm rewatching Sailor Moon right now, so I'm totally.
Where are you rewatching it? Because I do not know how to get hold of it.
It's on American Hulu. I don't know if it's on UK Hulu.
But I don't even know if we have Hulu, to be honest. I'll have to look.
Yeah, so I've been watching it on Hulu. That's an amazing syllabus of you. Mine, really quick, I just like sharing it, is The Protector of the Small Quartet by Tamara Pierce.
Oh, that's a good choice.
I'm obsessed with her. 100 Years of Solitude by Marquez. And The Electric Lady by Janelle Monáe, that album.
Oh, that makes you sound really cool. I mean, I'm sure you actually are, but like...
I mean, I definitely didn't pick like 12 seasons of Dance Academy that I watched.
Oh my god, I mean, if you put Dance Academy in, I can stick in Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and we can both be on the same level. It'll be fine.
I love it. Amazing. So we are now out of time. Tasha, where can we find you on the internet?
So I'm Tasha Suri on TikTok, Instagram, and Substack. and Tasha Drinks Tea on Twitter for however long Twitter is here for us. And I also have a website, tashasuri.com.
Excellent. People can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Speas Spice. That is SPEASY Spice. You can also find One More Page Books at www.onemorepagebooks.com, on Twitter at Just One More Page, and on Facebook and Instagram at One More Page Books. And yeah, thank you all for listening. Tasha, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you so much for chatting with me. That was so much fun.
Thank you so much to Tasha for taking the time, and for Rebecca for not only recording this, but also editing her own voice, a feat which I find incredibly difficult. Make sure to follow both of them, and if you want to keep up on the remaining things we've got going on for this podcast, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter for however long that lasts, at Misshelved Pod. We have been spotlighting different bookseller and bookish podcasts at the end of every episode, and I would like you this week to check out the LITERATICAST. LITERATICAST is a podcast hosted by literary agent Jennifer Loughran, where she goes over all sorts of different parts of the industry. So talking to agents, talking to cover designers, talking to editors, and sometimes talking to booksellers. Her most recent episode features her 2022 holiday gift guide, where she talks to the wonderful Cassie King, who you heard talk to Nina LaCour not too long ago, and me. So if you want book recommendations from me and want a wonderful podcast, head over to the LITERATICAST. We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks. And until then, happy reading.